My peephole grows where my love nose goes. Nobody knows but me.
All right.
Also, what fucking house only has one piece of drywall?
Huh?
It's usually drywall, a space for studs, and then drywall.
It's a closet, though.
Yeah. It doesn't matter. What, one piece of fucking drywall? No way.
Welcome back to Shat on TV, True Detective, the unofficial podcast companion piece to the hit HBO series, True Detective. I'm one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me are my two co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And the King Bee.
Tatanka means buffalo.
This is our deep dive edition where we look back on this week's episode of True Detective and provide our thoughts and analysis, plus the top listener emails for the week. This week's episode was entitled Hunters in the Dark. Guys, what do you think?
I think for an episode that focused so much on advancing the facts of the case and not so much the character development interaction that we've enjoyed through the first half of the season, I think it was highlighted by two scenes to me. You know, everyone's going to talk about the end of the episode, but I thought Scooter McNary. Scooter? Okay. The interrogation scene where Tom just finally, he breaks, he snaps. He lets out that animal scream, that the emotional scab is ripped off. And then also the other highlight for me was Wayne and his son Henry's, their heart to heart in the backyard. So in an episode that was basically focusing on the case, I think those two character interactions and scenes were the highlight for me. There's a vulnerability in Henry for the first time. And Wayne realizes some of his shortcomings as a father and tries to teach him. I made the mistake. I didn't mean to do this to you. Don't do it to your family. Don't hold back. And I thought it was an emotional, genuine moment.
Yeah, it definitely gave me some real Nelson vibes watching that scene and just kind of thinking, Papa? It was moving to see him without judgment, just kind of giving what he felt was the best advice he could give to his son.
I think beyond all the resolutions and strong scenes, there was also a return of strong writing that we saw in episode 4. Some people wrote in, and we'll get to those emails in a bit, that kind of complained about things being a little too nice and tidy. But to me, at an episode 6 level, I kind of want some of these loops tied up. And I feel like if they hadn't been, you'd have people in the opposite camp complaining exactly the converse, which would be they're just leaving all these things untied, and how are they going to wrap it all up in 2 episodes? But now at least we've progressed more towards some sort of resolution. But the writing, man, there was this great job that True Detective does when it's at its best, which is taking complex human descriptions or complex depictions of the human character and putting them into everyday language. I think one of the best examples is that scene with Cousin Dan in the diner, which I thought was fantastic. And he's talking about Lucy, and he said she'd push till she got what she want. Then she'd push till she got what she didn't want. And he's like, you know anybody like that? And I was like, That tells you exactly know what Lucy's entire deal, just based on that simple bit of summarizing an individual without being verbose. And another point, Wayne, when he's talking with Amelia, he says, life happens now, then later is now. It's this poetic, look at his philosophy toward the future, the past, and the present, and also kind of befits his dismissal of the past, and then later in life finding that he has an inability to recall it. I just thought there was a lot of strong, powerful, clever writing in this episode.
And I think one of Nick's strong points is his economy of words. He can convey a lot in a genuine way with only a few words. Wayne is in the detective's room. It's the day after, obviously, that Roland's gotten shot. He's still looking over. And then in comes, everybody. And they're going to now tell you, yep, we're going to pin this all on Woodard. Without going into it, how could you do this? This is bullshit. He says 12. There's 12 murders you're going to pin on him. Get your story correct. Like 12, 15 words, whatever it is, that conveyed everything. We didn't need the extra dialogue that dragged down season 2.
Yeah, for me, it's all about that first scene and then that last scene that we're going to talk about later. In the beginning, you just get this sort of wave of visceral animal emotion, and then just sort of the looming dread that comes with that. Then that end where you get your, oh shit, creepy ending. It gave me everything I wanted, and I really had a good time with it.
And so that oh shit creepy is when we see Harris creeping up behind Tom. He's down in this basement level pink room. We finally see the pink room, and Tom was a real focus of this episode. I think we got a lot of his background, a lot of what's happening with him in 1990 especially, and they keep alluding to what happened to Tom. And although we don't get to see exactly what happened to Tom, we follow him through a pretty good length of time through 1990.
We know that he does not survive this small time frame, because in 2015, in the interview, in the long list of deaths that they're attributing to the case, they say Lucy, Tom, they pin this. So I don't think there's any mystery. We're not going to open up next episode with a cold open of him tied up in the pink room. I think we can all say that Tom definitively is gone.
Do you dare speculate on how?
No, are you kidding me? Gene's head's going to explode if you do that. Look at him.
The show gives you guys a fucking hour about what's happening with Tom, and you're thinking about where he ends up, and let's speculate on that. Let's talk about what's happening to him.
I'm in. Let's do it. Yeah,
it's painful. We think, and Tom thinks, that everything he's experienced up to this point, he's rock bottom. His kids are gone, presumed dead. His wife ODs. His life is in shambles. He loses his job. He's hanging on by a thread, and he thinks this is the bottom. Then, right when he's hit bottom, he starts to build himself up, only to find out maybe my daughter's alive. Oh shit, she's saying I'm not the dad and insinuating that I've been abusing her. To now this interview where he's openly being accused, he is snapped. And that roar he lets out, it's one of the most powerful scenes we've seen. And I'm glad if he's gone, because this man could not suffer anymore.
Yeah, Scoot just cannot catch a break. It's clear that every cop in that room is just champing at the bit to railroad him. It's almost too sinister how every cop's just like, well, it's clearly going to be him. Hey, we're going to give you a warrant. Hey, go get the facts that point to him. Make it him. Make it him. It's scary and it's looming, and it's definitely going to be an ugly fucking scene moving forward as far as how they're going to make that case move and what it's going to say about Tom.
We talked after the Woodard altercation about how you see this in a lot of films and TV shows where two guys who have similar backgrounds have to face off and one's got to kill the other. I think we saw a variation on that where Wayne and Roland have to go in and talk with Tom and do the interrogation. And essentially, the way they set it up, they're like, if we let another cop do this, they're going to eat Tom alive. And so I figure they're going to go in there and softball him. I'm thinking, shit, if Roland and Wayne are taking it easy on him, what would have another cop done? It felt like there was just a combustion chamber in that room.
Well, you figure that the cops, they had rushed to judgment for Woodard. It was an easy way to tie up the case. That's now coming undone. This tape recording of this audio call from Julie, it's a godsend for them. They've hit the jackpot. They now have somebody else to pin it on. So I understand their excitement, and they say, hey, this is another slam dunk. Let's just pin it on Tom. But there's also a little doubt, I find, in both Roland and Hayes. Both of them are questioning, how could we miss this? Were we that wrong? They're not the only ones.
I mean, I took that interrogation as completely protecting him. It's one of those situations where you got to be cruel to be kind. I believe that there's definitely a shared moment between Roland and Tom. And Roland really has to protect that for his own, insecurities and reasons. If they aren't in there, those other cops, they're going to call Vic Mackey from the Shield to come in and close the case his way. And that's not going to be good for anybody.
There's an acknowledgement between Roland and Tom where maybe Roland isn't going in there only to protect Tom, but he's in there to protect himself. When Tom is breaking down, he says, how could you question me? Are you questioning me? There's a closer relationship than just suspect, detective, lieutenant. Even though he helped get him back on his feet and help him, there's an intimacy between these two men that hints at possibly a personal relationship that goes beyond the case.
I bet one of them owes the other one $10.
In other news, Tom's gay.
No.
So in this episode, we see that the old boss from, he's interviewed again in 1990, says Tom was going to a queer club back in the 1980 time frame. We also, when they get a warrant to search his house, they find a pamphlet on overcoming homosexuality through religious worship. So we've established now Tom is either a homosexual or being framed as a homosexual.
Oh, he's not being framed. You could see that he's been fighting this inner demon, and that falls right in line with the questions of the paternity of the children that, the rumors have been going around. So I don't think it's a frame job, but for me, it made me think, in the help that Roland provided Tom to get back on his feet, was this therapy, religious therapy, part of the process of getting Tom back on his feet?
I think the way Roland reacts after that warrant search of the house leads me to believe that Roland would not support anything like conversion therapy or anything like that. He seems very on edge afterward, very defensive of Tom when Wayne begins to pry a little bit, or Wayne seems a little frustrated with Tom. So Roland definitely, whether or not he's a homosexual, definitely has a sort of sympathy, or at least an identification with Tom. And I think after we've seen that scene, and then we get to the 1980 press conference where they're pinning it on Woodard, you get this great scene with Lucy and Tom sitting next to each other, and there's an empty chair between the two of them. Clearly things are not right here, in the sense that you have a couple, even if they have their differences, if their children are dead, they found the guy who presumably did it. They might be holding hands, and when he tries to reach out to her, she pulls away from him. They both end up leaving the place. I thought, again, the economy of the show, it expressed everything that's going on between these two.
See, but I think that loathing that she has, that self-loathing, goes back to the scene that we saw, I think 2 episodes ago with Amelia, where she's taking some blame in it. It's my fault. There should have been laughter in the house. The house wasn't that type of house. I think she feels guilty, not only for being a shitty mother and running around and, like she said, I think she said she had the soul of a whore, that she's not only upset about that she's done something that led to the ultimate fate or the situation Julie's in now. So that pulling away, I think, was a bit guilt and loathing and just so many emotions conveyed without a single word. Great performance.
Fast forward to Tom overhearing at the police station, which I thought was a little convenient.
A little.
All the facts about Dan, and Dan tipping off Wayne and Roland. And so Tom goes and he confronts Dan and pulls a gun on him. I thought it was a different side of Tom that we hadn't seen. Was this guy that's been pushed around for a while, and he finally does something about it.
Well, I think beyond pushed around, he's just pushed to the limit. Like this is the end of Tom. He's breaking, and we're watching it happen right in front of us. So it was definitely an exciting moment, and I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. He really brought it with a kick to the nuts.
A lot of times in Hollywood, when there's a fight, it's choreographed beautifully and the guys are skilled. These two sloppy, one's drunk, one's a junkie. The way they wrestle for the gun, it was awkward. And I think under any other circumstance, Dan would have called the bluff, and they would have been like, fuck you, I'm not going to tell you anything. But Tom pulls off that just crazy enough that he's going to shoot him in the dick, he's going to shoot him in the ear, that he would reveal the truth. But that was a great scene and just some awkward fighting.
I know that an action scene, if we could even call it that, has really gripped me. When it's over and I observe my body and I realize that I've contorted myself into like some weird position and I didn't realize it. My hands were up near my chest, like sort of like a T-Rex position, which also King B pointed out is the way I eat pizza. So that's a little odd, but yeah, it was absolutely gripping TV. And I thought, again, Scoot McNairy, from that interrogation scene to this scene, the amount of emotion that is coming out of the guy is just, it's shooting right off the TV screen at you.
Along with all that saliva, that drool that's coming out of his mouth, that's shooting onto the screen as well.
That confrontation between Tom and Dan leads us to this greater Hoyt conspiracy, which I believe King B kind of called out from before the season even started.
It's always those goddamn rich people.
So to recap, Harris, the cop who was on the scene collecting evidence in the 80s, we know that he went missing in the 1990s, but here in the 1990 timeframe, we do see him. So he's around for a while at least. He's head of security at Hoyt Foods. So immediately you see this connection. He's got his high-paying job where he, kind of wryly says, like, I protect the assets and secrets of, Hoyt Foods, essentially. We clearly now see that Wayne, when he says he doesn't remember Harris or whatever to the documentarian, either Wayne wasn't telling her the truth or he truly doesn't remember. I'm siding more on the he wasn't telling her the truth. There's definitely that's part of the cover-up. I thought they did a great job, again, of portraying this guy. He was, not just a throwaway character. There's a lot of character to him. They really fleshed him out quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, in the sense of how the story is built, it makes perfect sense. He's just a regular old highway patrolman or a beat cop or whatever. He's in the right place at the right time to be of some use to someone. And his payment for that is ultimately his new position in this corporate gig. Once he's in the gig, he knows where his bread is buttered, and he's here to toe the company line. He does a great job of handling his interview from Roland and Wayne. And it's obvious that this guy he's bought and paid for, and it fits in with the theme that these rich people, they have people that are there to serve their needs.
When they're talking to Harris, they're all but saying, we know you're dirty. Oh, how much do you make? How do you get this job? What are you protecting? The secret chicken recipe? What are you doing? They're telling him, we know you're involved. We know you're dirty, without saying it. And he's pushing them right back. Oh, I could figure a couple of these cops, guys without their GEDs, missing this in the case. They're giving barbs back and forth. So they both know what's going on without saying it. And then there's that weird ending, the donut conversation that we hinted at here, where is he hitting on Hayes? Is this a jab at Roland, maybe subtly? What's going on where he compliments his body in an awkward way?
So, I mean, it could be him hitting on Hayes. I took it as really the ultimate slapback, right? Because basically every time somebody's like, hey, you want a slice of pizza? Oh, no. I'm cutting down on carbs. I mean, I can tell you have a great body. So we do know that Harris James goes missing after this, though. So I'm interested to see what immediately happens to him. We obviously know that Roland and Wayne did something to someone. And I think the show is setting up these characters. Is it Tom? Is it Harris? But another guy that we see who goes missing and ends up in the quarry is Cousin Dan. Cousin Dan, in the 80s looked kind of creepy. I thought the 90s looked kind of sexy. He had like the red tint around the eyes, the long hair, the cool like Western shirt unbuttoned. I liked him.
He looks like a modern pop country star, really.
Sold.
No, he looked like a crackhead who'd be doing meth in that motel. He didn't look good. He looked strung out and sad. But we pretty much were assured, I don't think, that Tom, in this state of mind, after threatening to shoot him, beating him, killed him, and then took him out into the quarry. We know from his story that there's other bigger, powerful people at play here that will do anything to cover it up. I don't think Tom put him down that quarry.
One of the things that strikes me about Cousin Dan is that guy truly does not have a fuck left to give. He is cruising for an ass whooping. He's going to smart off to those cops. He knows he's fucking over some very powerful interests that are not afraid to make someone get suicided. That last line he throws them about, oh, are we just going to sit here and stare at each other some more? That guy, he's got some balls on him. That's for sure.
Yeah, Dan's got a pretty good plan for money here, and he might have, he might just get it, but he does make a few slip ups that the cops do catch a couple bits of information from him that he either was willing to give over or they actually extracted from him. And one is that he reveals that Lucy did grow up in a home with him from about age 4 and that they, quote, shared a lot of milestones growing up. It's possible that they were sexually active. Maybe he even fathered Julie. Who knows? If you notice when Dan's leaving, Wayne takes note of the fact that he drives a brown sedan.
Yeah, but that wasn't a late model. That wasn't a new one.
Well, it would have been new in 1980.
Every car there is like this yellow khaki color. They all look the same. They're generic. But that comment about sharing milestones and that little smile he gives, it's cringeworthy.
Well, they didn't get Eagle Scout together. That's for sure. It was the only milestone I could think of.
Wow. Well, topical. Another thing that we get there, too, is that Dan seems to indicate that although Lucy might not have been intentionally killed, her death was not entirely accidental. So she was either enabled to overdose or someone even might have encouraged her to do so.
Everybody's getting suicided.
Yeah, I think somebody helped that death come along. But the other big reveal here is that we finally get some confirmation of Julie's story about the princess in the pink room. So it wasn't just a hallucination.
Yeah, I understand that Tom is in a weird frame of mind. He's kind of lost everything. He's hit rock bottom and all. He takes a gun. He drives over to the Hoyt house. So again, you can assume that Dan gave him the name of Hoyt, and that's why he's going over there. I thought it was a really interesting choice that he goes into the house and the first thing he thinks is, I'm going to go look in the basement.
I'm going to go walk behind this great big safe door that could easily slam shut behind me.
Yeah, like, wouldn't you go up in the house? Unless, of course, Dan told him there's a basement with a holding area for kids.
I got a very Andy Dufresne, Shawshank Redemption vibe here, where he's drinking in the car. He pulls up to the entrance. He goes in, but it's comical. He tries to scale the fence. You know that Harris is sitting here watching the camera. He must have been like, what the fuck is this clown doing? He's not coming in covert. But that bunker that we see, that wasn't haphazardly thrown together. That was something that was thought out, thoughtful, well done. There was a kitchen there, and there was only one room, one door at the end with the pink room. There's been a lot of theory and speculation about there's a larger child sex ring. To me, what we see in the basement here is so not child sex ring. This is dedicated. This is something that shows a love and affection, that you wanted to keep something safe. That's what you do in a safe. If you want to have somebody that you're going to torture, you don't make it. There's obviously somebody down there cooking. That room was set up to make somebody attempt to be comfortable. There's a lot of sculptures outside, and there's one that looks like it's a patron saint. I could not identify what it was. But I think someone loved her, that somebody was taking care of her. This wasn't a dungeon. This was more a castle, more Rapunzel than that.
I mean, are we speculating? Because I'm ready.
I'm speculating. Fuck Gene. Let's speculate right here.
All right. So they talked about Elder Hoyt losing a daughter or a granddaughter or what have you, and just wanting to recreate or recapture that moment. So they groom this little girl, and they keep this little girl as a pretty little princess in a perfect pink room. It's not, I mean, there's probably some sex stuff going on. Let's be honest.
No.
That's going to come around eventually, but it's not a ring. It's just a guy had a fixation on this little girl and kept her as his little girl. Eventually, she becomes not a little girl, and she's just kind of released into the world. And that's all there is to it. What I really want to know is, what is Tom seeing when he says Julie's name at the very last moment?
The reason why I don't think anything sexual ever happened is the conversation later between Amelia and the girl in that church home. She recounts a story about why she eventually separated from Julie, that they got in with a guy with some drugs, and then he convinced her to hook. That tells me she wasn't hooking before. Generally, people who are abuse victims and living on the street, that would have been one of the first things she goes to. And the fact that this guy had to convert her to hook tells me it's something that hasn't happened to her before.
Well, she didn't say it was quite a trial to convince her to hook. If she had been the victim of some sexual assault, and, here I'm just speculating on what it's like for sexual assault for females, because, I'm a white man and I'm allowed to do that. I mean, she's clearly got some problems. One, being kept in a room. Two, maybe there was some touchy stuff. I don't see it. I wouldn't rule that out. I don't think there's any evidence to rule it out.
So what does Tom see?
Oh, I got that for you. It's the missing picture from Tom's house. It's the center picture. It's Julie. The mother gave it to Hoyt to put in the room, so it was something familiar, something to make her remind her of home. That picture missing. And
did we ever see that photo?
No, we have not. It's missing. The mark was on the wall. It is in that room. Mark it down. Boom.
I want it to be a big, creepy, haunted, painted portrait.
I want it to actually be Julie. Julie? Yes. All right, guys. You've had your time to be speculative. It's my turn, baby. Amelia writes a book, Life and Death and the Harvest Moon. When Roland is left alone in the room when Wayne goes to take a piss as they're old men in 2015, Roland walks over to Wayne's desk. He picks up the book, notices a revolver, and the book has annotations. It has highlights. It has tabs on it, sticky notes, kind of like you guys had said. What if he's been reading it this whole time? I think this might be his first reading through it. But I sat down like a freaking dork, and I can't believe nobody else did this. Not you guys, but like nobody who emails us and reads everything on the show and points out every detail about every doll. But I wrote down what it says on these 2 pages of the book. As a setup, I have 2 things that I'm going to guess are revealed in this passage. 3 things. 1 is that flip phones existed in 1990. It is true. I looked it up. Motorola put out their first one. 2, maybe Becca died. They're just not telling Wayne because he's forgotten. And 3, there's somebody named Ed, and we need to figure out who Ed is. So The passage begins. My eyes scaled what looked like 100 yards of sheer cliff, bathed fluorescent white in the moonlight. The road lay, and there's something illegible, were overhead, but there was no climbing toward it. No something illegible anywhere. We'd crash landed on a small shelf, a little ledge jutting from the side of the mountain. Beyond and below. And then a new paragraph says, my phone. And then a new paragraph says, I slapped my pockets, front, back coat, and remember how Ed had clutched it, waved away from me, how it had spun to the floor, danced there, rattling between my feet, that name blaring on the screen. I plunged into the car for the third time, swept the ceiling with my hand, finally found it lodged against the windshield, screen intact. It was a shock to see it so pristine. My husband was bleeding. My daughter was injured. My body was damaged. Our SUV was destroyed, but the phone had survived unmarked. A relic from another era. And then there's a little bit of blurry, and then we've been off the road for almost a half and something blurry. Now here's where it gets great is then there's about a half a page missing because it's blurry and cut off by the screen. When it resumes, it says, but when we become parents, we can never conceive that our children will not outlive us. But for them to outlive us is the order of things. To survive your child goes against every law. Lucy was weighted down with Will's death. I believe she held on for as long as she did for the chance that Julie, somewhere, was somehow alive. But she couldn't really be in the world. She used drugs to leave it, waiting for as long as she could, neither here nor there. All we can hope for is that when she left, she finally found peace.
The plunged into the car for the third time. I'm reading that as a car is submerged in water.
No, I believe what happens is the car is upside down, and so she's jumping in through the window. She's an author. They're dramatic, right? So jumping in through the window, because it says we crash landed on a small shelf jutting from the side of the mountain.
Could it be a quarry? Dun, dun, dun.
Oh.
I mean, it could be, but I think that'd be a pretty big tell in the book that came out in 1990 that but it could be. What was interesting though is there's a couple hints in there. One, the bathed fluorescent light white in the moonlight, as people may not know who don't grow up in agriculture areas like the King Bee and I did. A harvest moon is when the moon is so bright that you don't need a lot of excessive artificial light to be able to harvest crops. You can see pretty well. So that would be the fluorescent moonlight. That transition between the accident where her daughter was injured, or the author's daughter was injured, and talking about the death of children, you can only you might be able to assume that means that the child died as a result of this accident.
There's a parallel in this episode when Henry is discussing with his father's infidelity and whether he should tell the wife. And Hayes's comment is, don't unburden yourself to have someone else suffer. I would definitely see they would use that as a way to protect Wayne. Because, his daughter, if she's in California and she doesn't want to talk to you, that's a lot less painful than that she's dead. Even then Amelia said something like, I talked to her last week. So at least he would think she was safe and then he'd forget. That makes a lot of sense. And it's so painful to even think of.
What you can see in this sequence is that some man, presumably Ed, grabbed this phone and waved it away from the author. And then in this course of the accident, so either Ed was driving or Ed was a passenger who had the phone in the hand. It gets drops and rattles between your feet, whatever. So I was like, well, who's Ed? We haven't seen an Ed really in the show as far as I know. I went over the cast notes. There's no Ed in there. And King B mentioned, maybe the author changed the name of the husband to, protect his identity or make it a little bit more anonymous.
Or possibly Ed is the son, Henry. She's not going to put her own kid on blast for maybe screwing around in the car and causing the accident. Or, who knows? The accident could have been Wayne going through one of his mental blips. Ultimately, we don't know, but there's a lot of reason for maybe obscuring names to protect the innocent.
So one other thing I noticed beyond what was written in the book itself is that in handwriting, there were a couple notes, highlighted passages, things scribbled out. But at the bottom of the second page, there's a handwritten note in pen that says, Will Purcell's body discovered in cave in Devil's Den. And if that's meant to convey what I think it's meant to convey, that's really powerful. It's meaning there's all this detail in the book about complex writing about all these events. And the note is just trying to remember this one simple fact that Will was found in a cave. Like, that's where Wayne's memory is at this point. He's just basically trying to hold on to basic facts.
Well, that was another fact that we kind of got thrown in this episode, was that Devil's Den not only was just an area that the kids would play, but it was also known for homosexual activity. Is there anything to that, you think? Was that a red hair? Was that just something thrown in? Or is there a possibility that that Devil's Den has a bigger tie into the overall story?
I mean, I took that as them just trying to find clues that fit their chosen narrative. Devil's Den may not have been that, but, nobody lives in that town anymore anyway, so why not just say, oh, that's where all the gays used to go. There's no one there really to say that that's wrong.
I did cling on to that fact too, the comment that this town didn't die, it was murdered. I am waiting or interested to see if it is a result of something that happened with Hoyt Foods, which seems to be the primary employer in town, or if it was just a matter of, as a lot of Rust Belt and southern towns do, just die out as a result of people fleeing from them to bigger cities. And
real quick, before we move on, I want to just talk about Amelia's reading. She's kind of getting back in that limelight, and she's holding a reading at a bookshop, and all of a sudden somebody kind of steps out, and it's our old-timey one-eye black friend who we've been looking for a couple episodes, shows up and really calls her out on profiting off the misery of others, which, we're going to get some letters talking about Amelia soon. Ultimately, I think that this is the crux of her character, along with Wayne's accusation that, she's a tourist, that we as a people kind of need to chill out on this whole obsession with serial killers and murderers and podcasts that are super profitable and famous for kind of capitalizing on the fact that real people's lives are being harmed for our entertainment.
And to clarify on that, this is a different guy. So, Roland and Wayne were looking for a black man with a dead eye. They went out to the trailer park. They found who they thought was their man. It turns out it wasn't, and they never really followed up on that again to find this other guy. Or maybe if they did, we haven't seen it. So he shows up. He's clearly irate. I thought that we were going to see Amelia die there. I thought that was going to be the scene where this guy pulls a gun or something and blasts her in 1990 at her own book reading. Doesn't turn out to be the case. That is a loose end that we haven't picked up, other than if he happens to be another Hoyt Foods employee.
I will say that it definitely kind of had me excited to see where it was going to go. I was disappointed that it didn't come up again in this episode, because really this is one of the bigger reveals. If you think about it, this is someone they were looking for, and here he shows up in the 10 years later timeline. And Amelia knows that this guy he's a key figure in this case, and that's something the cops were never able to track down. Now he's tracking them down at her reading. This is huge for her. And why wouldn't she immediately be on the phone with Wayne going, holy shit, you need to come get this guy right now. I want to know what's going to happen with this, and I hope it comes up next episode.
That and whoever the fuck Ed is.
And Ed.
So enough of our speculation. There were a lot of reveals in episode 6 that kind of put us on the right track, set some facts straight, and confirmed some of the fan theories out there.
Yeah, and I kind of fluctuated back and forth, as the episode went on, because for a long time we didn't get many answers, and in this episode we got almost everything. And the problem is, a lot of these fan theories that people were coming up with, and we were coming up with, and that I was even openly laughing at you about, they conveniently and nice and tidily came true. That this story is either very convenient, or Nic is setting us up for some huge twist reveal at the end, and he wants to lull us into a false sense that we've figured it out. We're as smart as he is. I mean, we said before, somebody said Tom is gay. I laughed at it. That Henry was sleeping with Alyssa. I laughed at that. You said it after the hotel room when he walks in and says, did you have a guest? Because there was 2 wine glasses. There's the Hoyt food involvement. I laughed at a lot of these, but they're all panning out to be correct.
So I look at it in 2 ways. One is that, like with the Alyssa thing, of all the people that she could be screwing, it's got to be him. Like, of all the people, it's got to be a member of this small cast of characters, right? But then on the flip side, you go, well, that's what TV shows do. They show you the relevant stuff. They're not just going to show you everything that's happening.
No, look at what we've seen from Amelia. The women investigators in the show are both very comfortable with using sex or flirting. It's kind of a trope, and I think it's sad that they force her to use that. But she's not doing it because she likes him. I think she's doing with him to benefit her on the production.
Yeah, because that's how human beings act. And if you were telling a story about human beings, it would make sense that they would behave that way. Some film class talks about don't show anything on screen unless it has a purpose. So if you're looking at a room and there's a phone prominently featured in that room, that phone needs to ring. Don't put anything on screen that isn't going to be a working part in the story. So when people complain about, oh, it's coming together too neatly or it's getting all tied up quickly, fuck, how do you want them to tell the story? It's good that it's coming together neatly because that just means it's written well. I don't think they're treating us like we're dumb. They're not shoving it down our throats. Things are there, like elements are provided, then later their purpose is shown.
Yeah, it's classic Chekhov's gun. So you see the gun in the first act, it's got to be used, by the third. I think Big D is just sore about the peephole. There's no way you're going to shove a message through a peephole.
And you want what? I'm going to fucking do a screen grab. If you go back to the episode where we find the peephole, that shit is like 1/8 of an inch. That shit is like tiny, tiny, tiny. Now they could have been passing magic markers through that hole.
I totally noticed that when he pulls like the gum or whatever, the putty off it. I'm like, holy shit, that thing's like a centimeter big now.
Now it's a glory hole. It went from like a tiny peephole to they could have been like sticking their fingers through it.
My peephole grows where my love notes goes. And nobody knows but me.
Wow. All right, guys, we have a great set of letters that came into the watch. Again, if you'd like to write out, hit us up at hosts@shatontv.com. The best of the best will make it into this segment called The Watch. And we may truncate these just for time, but they will be featured in their entirety at shatontv.com. Just go to the watch section of True Detective. You can see them all there. The first one is a big one, guys, and it's from a listener who rewatched earlier episodes, Ben S. He writes, in episode 3, there are some brilliantly hidden nuggets I don't think anyone has brought to your attention yet. Go back and check out Julie's drawings that Hayes is holding. A pink castle, complete with a pink kitchen. Wherever she was claiming to be princess of, she had been a resident of it long before she disappeared. Okay, now that I got your attention, I wanted to return to something from last week. You discussed the line about someone, quote, acting like my father, end quote, might indicate, as the detective seemed to believe, that Julie knows Tom is not her father. But what if she was talking about the other man from the broadcast? What if the man she's referring to, the man she so loathes and fears, acting paternalistically as he urges her to submit to his custody, is none other than the Arkansas Attorney General? If you'll indulge me one more, I'd like to put in my tinfoil for a second and theorize about Amelia. In episode 2, when we cut away from the note, we go directly to an old picture of Amelia that Wayne is looking at ruefully. I believe that while she's not the big bad, Amelia planted the note, and her book holds the keys to many of the questions that have bedeviled us this season. I love your theory that Wayne has already read it and that he's repressing it. I even wonder if there's something more to her death. While it's often mentioned that she has died, we have heard nothing about the where, the why, or the how of it. All the best, guys, and thanks again, Ben S.
So I'll tackle the first part about the drawings, and that's a good catch. She was spending time with whoever became her caretaker, like you said. That would explain the holes and the missing time where they believed that Julie and Will were out playing with the neighbor's kid. That would explain that they were there, and maybe Will was part of it. But that she was familiar with this room was a very good catch. And it wasn't just that she was abducted and put in there. She was
groomed.
Yeah. That they were grooming her for what was going to come. But you also have to think that the money that Lucy was getting might not have just been hush money. It might have been a financial transaction to get Julie into a situation that was a better life for her. It wasn't just to buy her silence. It was a way to get her in a house with more laughter.
Moving on to the who's your daddy part of it, I don't know about this whole idea that it was Kent. We have no indication that he was acting paternalistically toward Julie. I think this one's pretty cut and dry. Tom was on the screen. She believes he's not really her dad, and that's all there is to it.
I respect the tinfoil, but this little room is in the Hoyt mansion. Lucy worked for Hoyt for a short period of time, and we know she was I think the quote was, she was spreading it around. I think it's not outside the realm of possibility that she slept with Hoyt. Hoyt had the kid, and Hoyt wanted to give the kid a better life. The Attorney General, it's a stretch. Fuck, who knows?
And then moving on to Amelia, whether she planted the note, I think it's a possibility. I don't know if there's that much of a connection. I think, as the King Bee said, Amelia is quickly being ruled out as a suspect here. It just seems that she's sort of a parasite.
She's a lovely parasite, though.
Wow, that's kind of harsh.
Thanks, Ben, for your email to The Watch. Next up, we have a regular writer, Kenny P. He's expressing his opinion on the quality of the episode. He says, I don't know the general feeling on this episode from the rest of the audience, but I sense it will be a mixed bag. Personally, I thought this was the worst episode yet, and I think this was a big step backward after last week's fantastic episode. This is why a show shouldn't worry about the swerves and mystery, because you'll end up with a bunch of scenes that don't fit together at all. You'll get characters who do things that don't make sense. For all the work they put into keeping Amelia dark and mysterious, it looks like they're now dropping that narrative entirely, which means the facade they put on episodes 1 through 5 to keep you, the viewer, suspecting she's doing something bad was all for nothing. Characters drive this story, and I thought this was a garbage effort to tidy up the story. It's hard to create a mood and a pace that they had in episodes 1 through 5, then try to speed it up in this episode. It was totally off, and I hope they right the ship by the next episode. Oh yeah, and Big D, still think Roland being gay is crazy? I'll hang up and listen for your response. Shat fan, Kenny.
Kenny, you're correct. I thought you were crazy. I thought, I think Gene made the comment, well, he doesn't want to have kids. And I was like, what? Is that our gaydar now, that someone is gay? I'm on board with you. And I'm even going to take it a step further and go out there, even though Gene hates it. I think, yes, he is closeted. And that was why he was familiar with the conflict that Tom was going through internally. And the big fight between Roland and Hayes that broke them up for 24 years and ended with Roland in a cabin secluded in the woods, Hayes is going to out him. He's going to out him, and that brings that context into the conversation where they're meeting for the first time on the porch, and he says, I live out here alone, no wife, no kids, no family, implying it's because of him. So Kenny, I like your thought.
Guys, I know I'm just a second stringer around here on the old Shat Crew, but am I allowed to tell a listener that he's a wackadoo?
Kenny, yeah, because he also changes his name every episode.
All right, Kenny P, listen, bro. You got to start monitoring your blood sugar before you watch these episodes, because your expectations are just way, way out of whack. Of course, they've dropped the whole Amelia thing. You're not going to think everyone is the absolute suspect until the final 10 minutes of the season finale. Have you watched any mystery? The first time that Gene read me this email, all I could think was, man, did you ever watch that Murder on the Orient Express? At some point, you think everybody did it. Then you think one person did it. Like, that's just how it goes. Pacing just changes. Things slow down. Things speed up. Like, you can't have a monotone show. You would get bored or you would get tired. I gotta disagree. It's well made. It's well laid out, and there's twists and turns. It's not going to be a giant 8-lane highway all the way to the end.
Kenny brings up an interesting question, though, which is, what is the worst episode so far? I loved 5. I think it was the strongest. 1 and 2 I thought was great. It could have been a standalone movie. I think 3 was the most striking drop-off for me.
I think it was 3 where I had mentioned that it left me wanting more, but not in a good way.
I agree. 3 was the worst.
All right, Kenny, thanks as always for writing in. We have a lot more about Roland here. Next one comes from Tasmin Yu, who writes, I just want to write in to say that homoerotic undertones surrounding Roland did not dissipate with this episode especially. If Roland had a crush on Hayes, I wouldn't blame him. Not at all.
No, that's some chocolate eye candy there. But yeah, they're not hiding it here. There's you always, what, was that wrong? I think
my butthole just puckered up, dude.
Well, why? Because I said chocolate? I was just...
You called a man chocolate candy. Chocolate eye candy.
I don't... He's a good-looking dude. Come on, I'm confident in it. I got no problem with that.
Hey, stop objectifying people, Big D.
Can he check your tunnel for VC any day?
No, I'm not into that, but that doesn't change the fact I think he's a good-looking guy. Okay, so I think we've always believed that Roland was protecting Tom because he felt for him. He was the suffering dad. There's something more to it. He defends him like 10 times in this episode. When they're in the diner, he defends Tom. When they're in the car, he defends Tom. When Hayes says, you know what, let's go back to the station and let's go look up some of those queer clubs. Let's see what's going on. Roland's like, I'm driving you home now. Let's call it a day. Why don't you go back? And he's trying to steer that part of the investigation. They're more than just friends.
If there's anything this season is missing is I want to see gay bars in Arkansas in the 80s.
No, that would be an awful existence. I think anytime people have to hide any aspect of their life, whatever it is, whatever you like to do, if you smoke and you hide it from your spouse, if you like porn and you hide it from your significant other, to live a lie and pretend you're somebody you're not, that's got to be a tough way to go through every day.
Yeah, it's like when you have to go to a dry wedding, you end up getting drunker than ever. Sorry to my sister.
Your sister had a dry wedding?
Yeah, she did. 1997.
Was it held at the Cracker Barrel? What's the point?
It was in Mesa.
Oh my God.
It was in Mesa. Thanks for writing in, Tasman. Next up, we have one from Al Shalon who writes in, I think the episode ending is misleading. Harris James ain't going to attack Tom because Tom came to warn Harris James of what Dan said about the Hoyts because Tom and Harris are lovers.
Oh my God.
I'm sorry, Canopy. You're not a wackadoo.
God, with all these series, the end might be just like some giant eyes wide shut gay orgy in Arkansas with all the most powerful men and detectives. Because right now, everyone is being suspected of being closeted.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense. He compliments Wayne on his body. He talks about his quote unquote hemorrhoids. Mm-hmm.
Do hemorrhoids have some kind of a correlation to homosexuality?
Butt stuff, dude.
Butt stuff, dude.
Do you really? Does it? I thought it was just from like sitting on the toilet too long.
You get them from all kinds of things.
You learn something new every day.
Lift something too heavy.
It's a hernia.
Exactly.
Well, isn't a hemorrhoid a hernia of sorts?
No, isn't a hernia is where your intestines are pushing through. We need like a hotline phone to go to Kerry where we could pick it up with.
A hemorrhoid is a swollen vein in the lowest part of your rectum and anus. Sometimes the walls of these blood vessels stretch so thin that the veins bulge and get irritated, especially when you poop.
Could it be said that these veins are herniating?
Did we get any more emails, Gene?
Yeah, we got lots. All right, next up we have one from Mark in South Florida who writes in, I enjoy your podcast. Never before with a show, I'm getting weekly conversations as my wife will not watch missing children shows. So he's talking about Pizzolatto here. He says, Nick, the writer and director, 2 notes from season 1 after the HBO show commentary. So point 1, Nick got defensive that his main characters, this is from season 1, Hart and Cole, were not anti-heroes, but they were true heroes. The same is happening in season 3. Detectives will be defended in the end as heroes. True detective means true heroes. And point 2, Nick points out Russ was asking for beers during his interrogation, so to avoid any possible self-incrimination. Nick is doing the same in season 3. Wayne's defense for a possible reveal on the TV show will be his mental condition for the crimes of a hero. That's from Mark in South Florida. So here basically what he's saying is on season 1, there was an interview about the season, and Pizzolatto said essentially that Hart and Cole are not just anti-heroes. They're actually true heroes, that they're great cops, they're great detectives, despite all the things that they did. They did it in the name of justice or to get to, a higher calling. And then in season 1, they also said that the reason why Russ Cole was drinking during his interrogation is that anything he said while drinking would be impermissible. Now Wayne is doing that. He's kind of using the dementia card to negate anything that he might say to Elisa during the interviews that might incriminate him. Also,
wouldn't it be great if he was using that mental deficiency as a way to get information out of people? That you wouldn't hesitate to say something in front of him if you thought he wasn't all there. When he comes back out of the bathroom and he sees Roland and pretends like, hey, what are you doing here? You're diffusing any tension. Roland might say something to you. People will loosen up. But, true detective, you're saying they're true heroes. It would be ironic if there was a big reveal. If you wanted to flip people and get people completely shocked, no one's even thought that either one of these two guys could have been involved. Roland could very well be involved in this.
If that's the case, I'm not happy with it because they've already shown that Wayne's incredibly insecure. He's leaving notes for himself. He's got that voice recorder. I feel like if you're going to show me all that stuff, then to later just say it's not relevant.
I'm not saying it's all an act. I'm saying you can use it when convenient. He remembers the conversation in the diner where they're talking to Dan. He remembers that vividly. He has moments of complete lucidity. you could also be then acting. Yes, he has some problem because the doctors have confirmed it, but you could also use it as times to get some information you normally couldn't have.
Yeah, I started thinking about those interviews with Elisa, the documentarian, and when people go to like therapy, right, or to counseling, a lot of times, and I've only been, I think, like 3 times, and just I wanted to see what the experience was like. And one of the things that was really interesting to me was the fact that they're not giving you the answers; they're just facilitating the conversation. If Wayne is having trouble remembering, but he wants to get to the bottom of this crime, maybe his motivation for talking to her is actually so that she works through the problem with him, and also might drop some reveals along the way, right? He's trying to pick up information from her, but it also might be that she's going to jog him and put him through his paces memory wise. And that would explain when he has to take those breaks and step away, and he's got to, it might be the sort of thing where he's having trouble connecting two things and he doesn't want to make a mistake. So he's got to step away, process that, and then he's willing to come back. So in essence, he's using her as a way to solve the case for himself. Thanks, Mark, for your email. Next up, we have one from Robert. Robert writes in, Big D and Gene, curiously not King B, I got hooked on True Detective 5 minutes in to season 1 and have been a hardcore True Detective fan of the show. What attracts me to shows like True Detective is the higher quality of storytelling and not officially plot driven. I would put True Detective on the level of Stanley Kubrick and Oliver Stone material. It's nice that there's a podcast to your favorite TV shows, and here there are people who feel the same about a TV show. But first, I have to come clean and tell you guys, I love True Detective Season 2. Yes, True Detective Season 2 is the best thing since the finale of Lost. Not only I love True Detective 2 that much since nobody liked Season 2, I think Nic Pizzolatto personally made Season 2 just for me. I loved every character, storyline, every episode, and the tone of the show. True Detective 2 had balls and said, fuck you to commercial TV audiences. For once, there's a show out there that didn't spoon feed its audience on how they tell a story. I'm baffled on how True Detective 2 has been received. I'll put it in a Star Wars analogy. True Detective 2 is the Empire Strikes Back. Even that said, I can't understand how True Detective 2 got so much shit. It isn't like season 1 was The Dark Knight and season 2 was Batman and Robin. If you think that, I'm done with y'all. My personal list of my top 5 TV shows is number 1, Lost, number 2, True Detective, number 3, Breaking Bad, number 4, Bates Hotel, and number 5, 24. And that comes from Robert Cantu.
If I was going to go my top 4 just off the top of my head, I've said Leftovers many times, Breaking Bad, Game of Thrones, I still really enjoy. And Rick and Morty, I think more people need to watch that if you haven't. I would never say that with Roger on the cast because he would just go off the deep end about how it's the greatest thing ever. It's a guilty pleasure. It's well written and enjoyable.
You guys are forgetting Fargo season 2.
I still need to watch that.
Oh my God, you guys! Let's just cut right now. You guys go watch Fargo season 2. We'll come back and wrap this up.
Sorry, we have to edit this and update the website. We don't get to watch Fargo season 2.
We don't have King B's schedule where we're deciding between are we going to go play 14 hours of Red Dead Redemption or go binge watch
Jeremiah Johnson for the 3rd time.
No, I'd like that schedule though.
Just wait until kayak season starts up again.
Yeah, you guys will never get me.
I got to say, I'm sorry, Rob, to say goodbye to you since you're going to be done with us. But True Detective 2 is the Batman and Robin to season 1's The Dark Knight. I think that's a perfect analogy, actually. And to say that it was trying to piss off commercial audiences, you wouldn't go with a cast like Vince Vaughn. Actually, maybe you would.
Yeah, mission accomplished. And hey, if you feel it was made just for you, buddy, you can have it.
Yeah, I was actually really glad to hear that somebody liked it so that it wasn't like a complete waste of time. That there was somebody out there, Rob, who said, you know what? This is the show for me. I'm glad that it's there for you. I'm glad you can enjoy it. And maybe someday we can sit down over a couple of beers in a small bar with a woman wailing on the acoustic guitar, and you can explain to me what's so great about True Detective 2.
But maybe he's just putting it in perspective. Yeah, season 2 wasn't great, but it was better than 90% of what's out there. I mean, you have people who are still watching the Big Bang Theory or fucking NCIS, whatever, Arkansas. That there's so many Walking Dead now. There's so many bad shows. Season 2 is still better than any of that. I checked out at 24 when Jack Bauer was doing like fucking heart surgery while deactivating a nuclear bomb and flying a plane.
I left Lost after episode 2 because I didn't buy Matthew Fox as the troubled doctor who doesn't want to be the leader of this group of castaways.
All right, Robert, thank you for your email. Next up, we've got the final one for tonight. It's from Ashley from the Dana Buckler Show, who is written in on, I think, every episode. Ashley writes in, let's take a moment to give a shout out to the amazing Scooter McNary.
The Scooter.
I have 2 children, and the guttural scream and frustration he gives after being interrogated, I can only imagine uttering myself if one of my kids went missing and I found myself in a similar situation. This brings me to another complaint, though. The fact that he's homosexual really feels like a reach. I have no issue with Tom Purcell being gay, but they really didn't earn that one. It feels cheap. It feels like a weird add-on, and I really hated it. I feel the same way about it as I did the insanely increased racial overtones in episode 4. Also, if they're trying to make it seem like just because he's gay, he definitely isn't Julie's dad, I will have a huge issue with that. As far as theory making goes, I only wanted to bring up the scene where Amelia is at the group home interviewing the runaway Shelley. We get that great shot of the landscaping truck with the Ardoin family name. I'm not sure if anyone else has written in about this, but we all remember, hopefully, Mike Ardoin from the first episode when he waves at Julie, and again in episode 2 when he's interviewed by the detectives and gives all those clues about Halloween. Well, I know you all hate it when we go on Reddit, but I had a Dana Buckler Show listener send me a Reddit link a few weeks ago, so blame them. It was talking about how the names on the show and their origins tell us something about the characters. For instance, Purcell means swineherd, which is supposed to relate to their being the outcast and debased family. Amelia Reardon has a last name that means royal bard, which of course is someone who tells stories. You can get lost in a Reddit hole and continue with more and more examples, but let's talk about Ardoin. That most commonly translates to home. So wouldn't it be interesting if adult Mike Ardoin is where Julie or Mary July found her home? We do know he was there landscaping while she lived in the home. Perhaps there was a sweet reunion of childhood friends, and now we've been given a clue as to where our adult Julie has found a home, or Ardoin. And that comes from Ash Schlafly of the Dana Buckler Show.
If there's another landscaper involved in this case, I'm going to fucking lose my mind. I'd rather have everybody be gay. If we get another Errol Childress lawnmower man, I'm going to be afraid of every maintenance, lawnmower, lawn care expert. I hope they're not involved.
I think one thing we do know about Pizzolatto is that he's not afraid to be, I don't want to say heavy-handed with it, but at least he's not the most subtle about dropping clues, especially with literary references, name references, stuff like that. I get a sense of watching this guy in interviews that he thinks he's real fucking clever. And this is the sort of candy that he just couldn't help but bite down on.
I thought I was the only one. And watching it after the episode, when they have the little behind the scenes, he's insufferable. I don't think I could sit in a room with him. The way he just, you would think that he is just fucking painting the Sistine Chapel every episode. What I really like about this episode is the way that Mahershala Ali embodied. Oh, come on. Takes himself too seriously.
To his credit, I think it requires that sort of passion and interest to make a product of this quality. Otherwise, you've just got a room full of television producers scripting reality TV and giving us the next NCIS or something like that.
I counter with Vince Gilligan.
All right, that wraps up The Watch and this week's episode of Shat on TV True Detective. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat on TV. On Facebook, search for Shat on TV Podcast. The website is shatontv.com. If you'd like to email us for The Watch, it's hosts at shatontv.com, or just write us with some encouraging words. We're everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Pandora, Spotify, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by iTunes, be sure to leave a 5-star review that helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert, and the King Bee, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us next week for episode 7 of True Detective.